So whenever you're ready. And I'll keep letting people in if they join late. So
okay, that sounds good. So yeah, we'll get started. Like Stephanie said, just if you have any questions throughout the presentation, use the chat feature down below. Just type in your question, and then at the end, we'll go through the questions and answer them. You could also just wait and ask your question at the end of the session as well. And we'll take questions at the end with the chat function, and then if you want to just ask a question at the end, we'll do that as well. So anyway, I thank everybody for joining us today. We are going to be talking about the Kiowa Island Shorebird Stewardship Program. We've been doing this program now for since 2017, and it kind of started off kind of small and slow, but we have built it over the last few years into a really important program that gets a lot of people involved, helps with protect the shorebirds, and a lot of that is because of Betty, who is the project coordinator on this program. She's a volunteer, and she puts a lot of time and effort into doing this. And I thank her for spending all the time that she does coordinating and doing a lot of the background work involved with this program. So, and for those that don't know, Betty, you can wave, and there you go. That's Betty. So I'm going to start I'll talk to you guys for a while about the birds and why we're doing this, and then towards the end, Betty will talk a little bit more about the specifics of the program itself. We will get started. I guess I will share my screen, and we will make sure everybody can see what I've got here. All right, so does everybody see just a screen that says Kiowa Island Shorebird Stewardship Program with some birds down kind of towards the bottom? All right. All right, so many of you may have seen this report that came out back in 2019. It made national news because of the staggering number of birds that have disappeared since 1970. It was a study that was put out in the journal Science, and they estimated that almost 3 billion birds have disappeared since 1970. And among those were a lot of the shorebird species. So they concluded that about 37%, or that shorebird numbers were down 37% since 1974. So that's a lot of birds. So kind of looking at that, there's a lot of other birds that are also in decline as well. Our forest birds, the birds that you see coming to your bird feeders, their numbers are also decreasing. Grassland birds are decreasing in even larger numbers. And so what are the reasons for that? So in shorebirds, about 68% of all shorebird species are declining. So in North America, we probably have, I don't know, maybe around 35 different species of shorebirds, and well over half of those species are declining. So for example, the ruddy turnstone, which is the bird on this picture here on the slide, since 1974, their numbers have decreased almost 80%. Semi-palmated sandpipers, which is another species that nests in the high Arctic region of North America, their numbers, I couldn't find a good percentage on how their numbers are decreasing, how much, but I did find that their population has kind of undergone a crash here recently, so their numbers are quickly declining as well. Red knots, a bird that we see a lot here on Kiowa all year round, but a lot of times, mostly here in the springtime when we have huge numbers. Their numbers have estimated to be about 70 to 80% decrease from 1980s to 2000s. So in a 20-year period, the population of red knots went down a lot. Now there is some good news. A little bit of good news there is since the mid 2000s, populations of red knots have appeared to stabilize. And it said the population on the eastern population, the subspecies that use the eastern part of the United States, North America, and even South America, has stabilized at about 50,000. And then some other good news, like I said, not all shorebird species are declining. An example of a species that actually is doing well and has increased over the last 20 years are American oystercatchers, and their populations are up about 23%. So I guess why are these birds declining, and then why do the birds need our protection? So these birds are getting hit at all different fronts. We have habitat loss is probably the number one reason why shorebirds and all birds are in decline. For shorebirds in particular, they live in a highly dynamic system already. So the beach is always changing because of natural conditions such as tropical storms, hurricanes, erosional events. So their habitat isn't consistent and it changes. So they have to be very adaptable to those changes. But then they're also getting hit with the human-caused habitat loss with development along the coasts. They're losing a lot of areas that were natural, which are not as natural anymore. And because of development, that brings a lot more people to the beaches. So they're seeing an increase in disturbance when they are at their and in their natural habitat. And of course, then we have the sea level rise, which is slowly happening and changing the way the beach and the systems work as well. So I've alluded to disturbance. These birds are being disturbed a lot when they're on the beaches. The people like to be at the beach as well, but the birds also depend on the beaches for everything. They feed there, they sleep there, they roost there, they nest there. So, and when trying to figure out a way to balance the needs and the recreation abilities and for the people, and then the needs of the birds can be a challenging thing. So, dogs on the beach and other natural predators are also different things of disturbance for these birds. Another thing is loss of food. So an example would be the horseshoe crab harvesting. For example, red knots rely on horseshoe crab eggs up in Delaware Bay for during spring migration, and they've timed over thousands of years. They've timed their migration to coincide with horseshoe crab spawning so that they can eat the eggs when they get there. And they rely on these eggs, which are full of fats and proteins and all kinds of things, so that they can build up those fat reserves to make that migration all the way to the Arctic. And they usually do that in one flight. So they may go from Delaware Bay all the way to the Arctic without stopping. So there's been an increase in horseshoe crab harvesting in Delaware Bay, which has been one of the reasons why the red knot population has decreased, and is because of the loss of the horseshoe crabs in that area. Fishermen use horseshoe crabs for fishing bait, and then also horseshoe crabs have been harvested for collecting of blood for the biomedical industry. Believe it or not, shorebirds are hunted in some parts of the world. People hunt them for sport and they hunt them for food. It's sometimes legal in some places, and in other places it's not illegal. So they're, as you can see, these birds are getting, there's lots of reasons that are going into the loss of the population declines. So when we're thinking about how we can protect these birds here on Kiowa, you know, the one thing that we can actually contribute is with the disturbance part. So, you know, we can talk to beachgoers and we can regulate where dogs are on our beaches. There's not a lot we can do with natural predators, although by reducing disturbance of people and dogs, that kind of will help reduce predation as well. So there's kind of an indirect correlation there with the predation part. So to kind of help with this whole problem, we developed the Shorebird Stewardship Program. The objectives of this program is essentially we are the ambassadors for the birds. So you know, they can't tell us what they need so much, so we have to kind of do the work for them. So the number one thing is we need to educate the public. If the public knows why these birds should be protected, then they are more likely to follow the rules and the guidelines or whatever that we have kind of set forth to try to protect these birds. We also want to kind of enhance the beachgoers' experience. So we don't want to just, you know, go up and just tell them what to do or what not to do, but we want to, you know, explain to them, you know, why it is important for these birds. You know, give them really cool facts about the birds, make them kind of think of the birds a little differently other than just birds that they see on the beach that, you know, might be fun to make fly when they run through. But instead make them think about that these birds need this beach to survive. And the other thing we can do is we can protect key habitats on Kiowa. In this picture, this was taken 2 years ago when we had a group of stewards that went out and helped put up the bird nesting signs, which is where the protective area at the east end of the island where the birds nest. So these are all things we can do here on Kiowa to help protect the birds that use Kiowa. All right, so now I'm just going to kind of go through some birds. We're going to tell you a little bit about our focal species, which we have listed here, and the 5 focal species that we're going to talk about are the least tern, which is starting up in the upper left-hand corner, the Wilson's plover, which is the one to the right of that, American oystercatcher, piping plover, and the red knots. So those are the ones we're focusing on mainly because they do something either unique here on Kiowa or their population, they are either like an endangered species or a threatened species. So I'm gonna start out with the least tern. The least tern, so this is the smallest tern species in North America. And they are literally tiny. They're probably only, they'd fit in the palm of your hand if you were able to pick one up. They typically arrive in late March, so they're on their way. They're not here yet, and they're colony nesters. So that means that they nest in a large group, and their nests are fairly close together. So this is a strategy employed by a lot of beach type nesting birds, where they densely pack their nests close together and in one area, which it's kind of the strategy where you have many eyes in an area. So you can, you know, if you have a lot of birds in an area, there's a lot of eyes to look for signs of trouble or predators or things like that. They lay their eggs directly on the sand. So they don't really build a nest with sticks or twigs like a bird would in your backyard. They kind of just dig a little little depression in the sand, and then they lay their eggs directly on top of the sand. Now, in a lot of places in South Carolina, they also are nesting on rooftops because of a lot of their areas that they used to nest in are not suitable anymore on beaches. They've found that flat roofs that have the pea gravel on top are kind of mimic a beach. So the birds have started nesting on top of a lot of these roofs. So like old grocery stores and school buildings and things like that, they're finding that these birds are nesting on top of. And some of these birds are going fairly far inland to do it. So they're not going, they're West Ashley and Mount Pleasant and areas like that where they're going, away from the beach to nest. And the South Carolina DNR is working with a lot of those areas where these birds are nesting on roofs to help protect those birds on the roof too. Because when you nest on a rooftop, there's some inherent risks with that as well. Lots of chicks fall off the roof because they just don't know any better. So there's barriers are placed up on the roofs and different things to try to protect the birds that do nest on the roofs too. They are a South Carolina threatened species. So they are protected here in South Carolina. They're protected federally as well, but they have a threatened designation in the state here in South Carolina. And last year we had about 150 nests on Kiowa. All these birds nested on the east end of the island, and we actually had the largest nesting population in the state last year. That was successful. So meaning that they had 150 nests and they also hatched chicks out as well. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with our program. We've had least terns try to nest in the past, and they've not been very successful. Either they get disturbed and they abandon the colony, or we get a big high tide that might overwash their nests. So I think we had a couple things come into play last year, and where we had a part of the beach that built up high enough to withstand some of those larger tides. But we also had a shorebird stewardship program, which helped to protect and educate the public about the birds out there. So they were less disturbed than they might have been, I think, in previous years. So this is kind of what a least tern looks like. As I mentioned, it's a small bird. They have a yellow bill. So they'll be the only tern that we'll have on our beach that has a yellow bill. The other terns will have an orange bill or a black bill. They also have that black head, kind of with a white forehead. That's another unique feature, which kind of gives them the unique look that they have. And they have yellow legs. Down in the left-hand corner is a recently fledged, a young juvenile tern. So they look a little different than the adult does. They have the dark bill, which will slowly turn to yellow over time. As I did mention, they are common here in spring, summer, and fall, and they do not occur here in the winter. They all migrate all the way. They migrate south in about around August and spend their winter in northern South America. So this is a picture taken by Robert Hill. He's a Kiowa resident, and he took a lot of pictures out at our tern colony last year, and this was a picture he took last year. And as you can see, the chick is in the middle of the picture, and you can kind of tell just how camouflaged that chick is with the sand. It's ideal. I mean, it's almost the same color as the sand. That chick is fairly young, so when they hatch, they are mobile within hours. They're not naked like a like a songbird would be, and they take time to develop in the nest. Once a chick is hatched, they are able to leave the nest within just a few hours time, and they will kind of walk and find some cover to go into, like these little rack piles and little parts of grass here, and they'll spend their time kind of hiding in that while the parents go out and catch fish and bring fish back and food back to feed them. The next species is the Wilson's plover. This is another species that is a bird that nests on the island. It's a medium-sized plover. So in relative to the other plover species, size-wise, it fits kind of in the middle. I'll talk about them a little bit later, some of the other species, but they nest here from March to July, but they're also present year-round. So we do have some individuals that either stay year-round, or the individuals that we have here in the winter are different individuals that are here in the summertime. So the birds that nest here may leave, and then new birds from different places may come here for the winter time. They are more of a solitary nester, so you won't see, 30 Wilson's plovers all nesting together. But you might see a Wilson's plover nesting in amongst a colony of least terns. They'll take advantage of that colonial situation, but they don't want to do it with others of their own species. They're a little bit more territorial against the same other Wilson's plovers. The other thing with Wilson's is they'll lay their eggs directly on the sand, but their eggs are going to be their nests are more concealed. So rather than just being laid kind of out in the open on the beach, it'll still be on the beach, but it's going to be in an area where there might be a little vegetation to kind of hide those eggs a little bit, as you can kind of see in this top picture here. You can kind of look at those eggs too, see how well camouflaged they are. So it's important that when we sign these areas that we try to keep people out of these areas, because somebody walking through there will never see those eggs and can step on them because they're so camouflaged. These guys are also a South Carolina threatened species. So they have a designation to them. A designation to them within the state, which kind of designate them as a threatened bird, which essentially means that there's things that could cause them to go extinct or become endangered in the near future, but they aren't there yet. Last year, we had several nesting pairs last year. They're a little harder to survey because their nests are a little bit more hidden and spread out, but I would estimate we probably had around 12 to 15 pairs of Wilsons that nested last year out on the east end of the island. So this is what they look like. They're kind of a plain looking bird overall, kind of the brown back, white underside, but they do have that dark ring around on their chest. The males have a black one and the females will have a brown one. So this picture here has two males together. And if the female, the neck band would just be the same color as the back here. What makes them unique is in plovers is they have this really large black bill compared to other plovers of their size. They use this bill to pick off invertebrates and crustaceans and things off the surface of the sand. So rather than probing down into the sand like the sandpipers that have those long bills, these guys are actively foraging on top. And they like to specialize in fiddler crabs. So they use that large bill to grab those fiddler crabs and shake off that large claw so they could eat the fiddler crab. Another unique characteristic on Wilson's plovers are the leg color. So whenever we're trying to identify shorebirds, there's certain things we kind of look for, and a lot of times we'll look at the color of the legs to kind of do that. And Wilson's are the only plover species that we have here that are going to have these flesh-colored legs. The other plover species are going to have more of yellow or orange legs, or kind of or darker gray legs. All right, so this is another picture from last year. Can you guys see find the chicks in this picture? They're kind of right here. Can you see my cursor going around them? Does that work for you guys? Okay. So they're you can see how well camouflaged they are as well. So these chicks are probably only a few days old, and they look like just little cotton balls on toothpicks when they run around. So they're actively hiding in that rack line, and that's basically the places that they like to hide in during the day while the parents bring them food. So it's important that the rack lines that we have out on our island on a beach are actually it may look ugly, but it's a very important habitat or micro habitat that is really important for chicks and things and other birds and things like that out there. All right, the next one is the American oystercatcher. This is a very large shorebird. These guys stand, they could stand probably a foot tall or so. They are another nesting bird that we have here in the summertime. Their nesting season goes from about April through July. They are a solitary nester, so you won't see a group of oystercatchers nesting together. They will lay their eggs directly on the sand. They usually lay them on an elevated part of the sand. So this picture here, this bird just looks like it laid it in a flat portion, but a lot of times they'll pick a spot that's just like a little hill of sand out there, which just gives them some more protection from high tides and things like that. As their name implies, they feed mainly on bivalves, and they have that long, strong bill, which allows them to probe the sand for clams and things, and then they're able to use that sharp tip to get in there and kind of snip the muscle of the bivalves so that they can open the clam up and eat what's inside. Last year, we estimate we probably had 6 to 8 nests on Kiowa, which is actually up a lot from in previous years when we might only have 1 or 2 nests out at the east end. So kind of when I was telling you that the oystercatcher numbers have been increasing, we're also seeing that here on our beach as well. So they're a unique looking bird. You really can't miss them when you see them out there. Like I said, they're a large bird. They have that really black head and that brown back with that really orange bill, and they have that bright red ring around their eye. They're also can be kind of noisy. So when they make a kind of a unique sound. If you can probably Google American oystercatcher sound, and I probably could have put one in this presentation. Didn't think about it, but you can hear them a lot of times before you'll might see them. And they are here year round as well. So we do have birds that nest here, but then we also have them using Kiowa throughout the year as well. This is a picture of that Pamela Cohen took. This might have been, I don't know if this was last year or not, but it could have been one of the years we had chicks. But the bird on the right is a young oystercatcher, and you can kind of see this bird's fairly old. This bird's probably several weeks old by now, and he's kind of starting to look a little bit more like the adult. and they'll stay with the adults for a long time. A lot of all these shorebirds are really good parents. So, you know, the males and females both take care of the young, and they stay with them to protect them. They show them how to find food and things like that. So, you know, they're very attentive parents, and you know, they may only hatch 1 to 3 chicks every year. So that's they kind of have to put in that parental care to ensure that, because they're only producing, you know, 1 or 3 chicks every year. They put in that parental care to kind of ensure that that those chicks survive. All right, the fourth species is the red knot, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the red knots and the story on the red knots. But they are a medium-sized shorebird. They are a migrant, so they don't nest on Kiowa. They nest up in the Arctic. They stage here on Kiowa in the springtime, usually from March till May, in huge numbers. So as I mentioned earlier, when I said that they go to, a lot of the population goes to Delaware Bay to feed on horseshoe crabs, there's also a substantial portion of the population that comes to what we call the Georgia Bight region. And that's that kind of that curve in where South Carolina, Georgia, and North Florida on our coast. And the red knots kind of stage in this area, and in particularly in the Charleston area, one of the largest flocks in that area occurs, and they start to show up in March, and their numbers build and build and build and build. And by May, we could have, you know, 4,000 to 5,000 red knots here using our beach. And they're not feeding on horseshoe crabs as much here, but they're feeding more on coquina clams. So you'll see, like this bottom picture here, these are the zone that they feed on. Those is kind of right along the shoreline, and they probe into the mud, into the sand and the mud to look for these clams, and they essentially eat them whole, and crush up their the seeds or the shells in their gizzard, and then they regurgitate or they'll send the shells out the other end, and just kind of digest the inside parts. Recently, these birds were listed on the Endangered Species, the Federal Endangered Species Act, and they are now federally protected and listed as a threatened species, which requires a little bit, kind of puts a little bit more protection on these birds than some of the others, being that they are listed at the federal level. So as you may have heard, you know, red knots have one of the longest migrations of any bird. The eastern population, which is what we're kind of talking about now, they could travel over 9,000 miles from their wintering area, from the tip of South America all the way to their Arctic breeding grounds. You know, so there's a portion of the eastern population that will spend their winter all the way down here in South America, and they nest all the way up here, and they make that flight every spring, and then they return again every fall. So, you know, they could be traveling 18,000 miles in a year, going from the southern hemisphere all the way to the northern hemisphere. And they do it, and they make this migration a lot of times in very kind of a short period of time, or relatively short period of time, where, you know, they may leave from the southern tip of South America and fly all the way nonstop to Brazil, the northern Brazil, where they may stage here for a while and fatten up, and then they're going to make this long flight over the Atlantic Ocean nonstop, sometimes for several days without stopping, until they reach the eastern United States. where they have another leg of their journey where they may stop and rest and fatten up again until then they make their last leg, which is another potentially a nonstop flight from the east coast all the way to the Arctic breeding ground. So as I mentioned, we could have the Kiowa is a major staging area for red knots, where up to 5,000 red knots can be seen roosting or foraging along our shoreline. And it's a critical time for red knots. They need to build up enough fat while they're here so that they can make that long flight to the Arctic. So, essentially we're every time a bird has to is disturbed and has to fly because either a dog or somebody or a biker or somebody goes through a flock, that's energy that bird's using, that it could be using or storing that fat. So it's critical that these birds have the time that they need to put on those fat reserves so that they can make that successful journey all the way to the Arctic to breed. So this is kind of what red knots look like. So in the wintertime, they look completely different than they do in their summer plumage. So in March and stuff, when they're here, this is what they look like. So they're just kind of a grayish bird overall with kind of a white belly, but they do have this kind of barred flank here, and they have the medium-sized bill with this kind of white kind of eyebrow going above their head. They can have black legs, or they can have kind of this yellowish colored legs. The yellow legs are more indicative of a juvenile, and adults will have darker black legs. And as these birds are staging here, by the end of April and early May, these birds have molted out of this plumage and into the breeding plumage. And by the time they leave Kiowa, most birds will have become this kind of rusty red color here on their head and belly, and have kind of got this I don't know, this kind of rusty pattern on their back with black and things like that. So it's a lot of energy also to produce feathers. So another reason these birds are here is not only to put on fat for migration, but they also have to put on and get enough energy to replace all those feathers as well before they migrate to the Arctic. All right, the last bird we're going to talk about is piping plovers. And this is a medium-sized plover, a little bit smaller than the Wilson's plover, but not terribly, not super tiny compared to them. There are 3 distinct nesting populations of piping plovers. We have the Great Plains, which kind of nest in the Great Plains, as it says. There's a Great Lakes population, which nests here along Michigan, Wisconsin. And then there's the Atlantic population, which nests along the North Atlantic coast. And they have, each population is has a different designation for. So the Great Lakes population is an federally endangered population. The the Great Plains is threatened, and as of right now, I do not believe the Atlantic population might be threatened, or it may have just gotten changed. But anyway, so on Kiowa, we have currently probably about 3 to 5 individuals that winter on the east end of Kiowa, and then there's another 5 to 8 that will spend the winter on the west end of Kiowa. At the west end, they kind of we share them with Seabrook, so they bounce back and forth from the Captain Sam's area. They'll be either spending their time on Seabrook, and then they'll hop over and come over to Kiowa and back and forth. But the birds at the east end are generally always going to be down at the east end. And we do have birds that winter here from all three of these populations. So we do have birds from the endangered Great Lakes population. We have birds that come from the Great Plains and the Atlantic. All three populations that are distinctly separate. They all commingle on the wintering grounds. During peak migration, which is coming up for piping plovers, we can see a lot of these birds on our front beaches. So during one survey I had, I don't know how many years ago it's been, I had just on one drive of the beach, I counted over 100 piping plovers from the west end all the way to the east end, which is, from what I was told by some fish and wildlife folks, that that was the largest count of piping plovers in one spot that's ever been in the state. So I hit migration at the perfect time that day to see all those birds on our beach at one time. So this is what they look like. They're kind of like I said, in the wintertime, they're a really light colored plover. So their back is almost as light as their belly. It's kind of a lighter gray color, but it's a perfect color to blend in with our beaches. It's almost the same color as our beach, their back. They do have a pale breast band, which in the wintertime is not seen as well as it is in the summertime. And as I mentioned, their bill is pretty small compared to the Wilson's plover, which has a larger bill. And that's because they feed on different things. So these guys will feed on invertebrates. They like marine worms and tube worms and other things that are found just below the surface of the sand. So a lot of times they'll just you'll see a bird that just kind of is standing there motionless, and then all of a sudden it'll take 2 or 3 steps real quick, and it'll pop its head down into the sand, and it'll pull out a worm. So they're using that small bill to kind of pick those birds, those worms that are right under the surface. They have a yellow kind of orange colored legs in the wintertime, which sets them apart from the Wilson's plovers. In the summertime, or before as they're migrating through here in March, we'll see birds in their breeding plumage. So this time of year, birds that are in the wintertime will look like this, and they'll slowly transition into their breeding plumage, and they'll get this darker necklace here. They'll get this little black forehead band. Their bill will kind of turn from black to an orange, and a lot of times their legs will get much brighter orange as well. All right, so that's the 5 focal species. Everybody still with me on all that? That was a lot. So I created this graph just to kind of show you the frequency and abundance of all those focal species. So kind of like, this is when you can expect to see these birds and about their relative abundance between each other. So, like I said, least terns are here in the greatest numbers from April through July. Their numbers kind of slowly diminish through the fall as birds leave. Wilson's plovers are here year round, small numbers in late fall and through winter, and their larger numbers are here now from March through July during their breeding season. Oystercatchers, we have large numbers that move through during fall. We have smaller numbers here, but the birds that are here in the summertime are breeding here. Piping plovers are here, have been seen on Kiowa pretty much every month except for the month of June. So like I said, I just talked about, we have a large population here in March as birds are moving through. And as the spring progresses, it kind of slows down as birds kind of move through to the breeding season. And then in shorebirds, a lot of times migration can start in July for them, and they start heading back. They start heading back in July because the Arctic summer is such a short window that if once they get up there, piping plovers don't nest in the Arctic, but for other species, once they get into the Arctic, they don't have a lot of time. So if something happens to their nest and it fails or gets predated, they don't have time to re-nest again. So a lot of times they just then leave and start heading back south. And then of course the red knots, which we have a huge yellow blob here from March, April, and May. And, you know, just a handful. When I say a handful, I might mean, you know, a couple hundred here throughout the winter time. And we don't usually see red knots during the summer months. So I created this calendar to kind of show the seasons, our shorebird stewarding seasons. So, you know, for least terns, our I guess we call it our busy season. We're protecting them during nesting season. So that's April, May, June through July. Wilson's plovers are going to be the same. So they do get here a little earlier. There's Wilson's plovers already here, and they've already started courting. And they probably will have eggs on the ground probably by the end of the month. So, so we can start a little earlier for Wilson's plovers, you know, mid-March through the end of July for them during nesting. Same with oystercatchers, about the same time period. Piping plovers are, like I said, they're here mainly during the winter time. It's harder it would be hard to steward for them during migration periods because they're only here for a day or two and then they're gone. But they're consistently here during the winter time, basically from October through March. And then our red knot season lasts in the springtime. Like I said, their migration, these birds are only here during migration time during the spring, when they're here in those large numbers. We want to try to protect those flocks from getting disturbed too much, so that they can feed and rest and build up their fat to get to the Arctic. Okay, so some other birds. I don't want to spend a lot of time on all the other birds, but there's a lot of other birds that use the beach as well. And as I mentioned, 68% of all shorebird species are declining. So, you know, by stewarding and sharing our knowledge with beachgoers and teaching them, you know, how and why to respect the birds, and we're also benefiting these other species that are on our beaches as well. So, you know, these birds are indirectly benefiting from our actions as stewards, because, you know, we may talk about least terns, but, you know, royal terns and black-bellied plovers and skimmers are also, you know, going to benefit from that message that we're sending out. And I'm not going to go through all these, but this is kind of a list of the more commonly seen species that you may encounter on the beach. So, you know, we have 15 commonly seen species of sandpipers, you know, 5 or 6 species of plovers, another 7 or 8 species of terns, 4 species of gulls, 5 or so species wading birds, and then, you know, there's a lot of other species out there too. I just named a few because I didn't have much space left. So it just kind of shows you, you know, the diversity that we have out on the beaches and things that the birds that you may see while you're out there. I put this slide in here mainly just to kind of give you an idea of, you know, because the beach is a dynamic thing, and we have this thing, you know, we have the tides that happen. You know, birds are not always just going to be foraging. At a certain point of the day during high tide, a lot of these birds can't feed anymore because what they're eating is now underwater. So during those periods, they basically are roosting. And a lot of these birds roost in large groups. They could be, and the species will mix together, and there could be 10,000 birds all roosting together down on the east end during high tide. So when you're thinking about when I'm going to go out and maybe steward today, you kind of have to think about the tides and what you might see when you get out there. So if it's high tide, you're going to be focusing mainly on birds that might be roosting and not feeding. So you may go to the ends of the island where these birds are going to be roosting at, and spend time out there. During lower tides, these birds are now going to be spread out a lot further and feeding. So the area that you have to kind of steward is a lot larger now. The birds are spread out and they're doing a different type of behavior. So just something to kind of keep in mind. In general, you have the high tide roosting period is kind of designated as what we kind of just say in general 2 hours before and after high tide is kind of considered that high tide period. And then you have a longer period during the falling tide, low tide, and rising tide where birds are foraging. Okay, so we are done talking about all those birds. We're going to now move over and talk a little bit more about the protected areas that we have on the island. So we do have critical habitat designated, and this is a federally designated thing, protection area, and those are the ends of the island basically. So on the east end, here, anything wet east of the Ocean Course Clubhouse is designated as critical habitat. And because of that designation, the town can put certain restrictions on what people can and cannot do in those areas. So, for instance, we don't allow any dogs east of the clubhouse because of that. And during the nesting season, we're able to close portions of the beach down to protect those nesting birds and not allow dogs aren't allowed anyway, but people then are not able to walk through those areas as well. The west end of the island is also designated as critical habitat. And if you ever walk down towards Captain Sam's, you may see there's a sign right around here that says, no dogs allowed past this point. That's the beginning of the critical habitat area. And so year round, there's no dogs allowed down at that end of the island. And that's to protect lots of things, that's to protect the birds that are using that end, to protect dolphins that are using that end down there, down in to strand feed and things like that. We used to have birds that nested down here, but when, I don't know, back 5 or 6, I don't know, maybe it's been even longer now, when that inlet got recut, all of our nesting habitat got moved over to Seabrook. But now over the years, that inlet is moving back and closer to Seabrook again. So we have gained a lot more habitat on the Kiowa side. And to my eyes, it looks like we might have some nesting habitat this year. We're going to have to wait and see, but it's possible that we might have some birds that might start to nest down at the west end this year. And if that does happen, then we will designate and rope off that area where the birds are nesting at. Here's a map of the entire island. This is our pet restraint requirements, our leash law, basically. So as you can see, the red areas are the critical habitat where there are no dogs allowed at any time of the year. We have this long stretch of beach basically from that sign halfway down towards the spit all the way to the beach club, which is a seasonal dog leash area. So this area here, dogs can be off leash during the months from November through March 15th. Dogs must be under control of the owner, which is a vague term. But another caveat in our ordinance is it does allow any person on our beach to to ask that person to put their dog on a leash if the dog is, if they don't feel comfortable with that dog with the way it's acting. So an owner must have a leash on them at all times. From March 16th through October 31st, there are no dogs have to be leashed in the screen section. And that was mainly done because of sea turtle season. But the birds also benefit from that as well. And we have this small section between the beach club and the ocean course, where we, back in 2014, we designated that as kind of the dog use area, where dogs can be off leash year round. It's a less populated part of the beach where there's less people. And that's kind of the dog area where they can be off leash year round, but they must still also be under control. And the owners must have a leash on them. And if asked, they must put their dog on a leash. All right, so this is our bird nesting area on the east end. So you've got the Ocean Course Clubhouse here. If you've been out to that area recently, we have this lagoon that's formed and it's been there for years now. And this is the designated area where we will put up these yellow signs probably in the coming weeks. And we will basically close this whole section of this beach off to allow the birds to nest without getting disturbed. Last year, in this section right here, we had oystercatchers and Wilson's plovers nesting. This section here wasn't signed last year because it looked a little different. This was all kind of overwash area where there wasn't nesting habitat, but it's built up a little bit now. So I'm assuming this year it may get completely one big large area rather than the two smaller areas that we had last year. The least terns last year nested right in this section here. And we also had some Wilson's plovers and a couple of oystercatchers that nested out here as well. So this area is restricted access. So once those signs go up, nobody will be allowed, unless, somebody's doing some sort of official nesting survey or, doing something official within that area, which wouldn't really be anybody, but potentially myself or Turtle Patrol may have to go in there if there's a sea turtle nest that gets laid in there to mark it. So, but other than that, we keep people out of that area, because once birds start nesting, it doesn't take a lot of disturbance. It could just take one or two people walking in that area, and those birds are going to abandon their nest, and they won't come back. So, and they won't try again until next year. So they'll try to find someplace else. So it's very important that we keep these nesting areas as restricted as possible, and try to keep people out as much as we possibly can. Okay, so you're kind of the responsibility of a steward. So like, as I mentioned before, your job is to kind of enhance the beachgoer's experience. We want to show people the birds. So, in years past, before we had COVID, we would encourage, you to share your binoculars with people so they could see the birds a little closer. Obviously we can't do that this year or last year. So we're not going to encourage you to share, your binoculars with anybody else this year. But, you can you can point the birds out to them and still talk to them and show them, the birds in a distance. Give them a chance to appreciate the experience. So, make them feel like, they're seeing something unique here. Use the talking points that you'll have on your steward sheet, which we will give you later. These are basically facts that you can share with the beachgoers. Let people know that these birds are sensitive to disturbance, as I just kind of talked about. Don't flush nesting birds. Don't flush birds that are roosting or feeding along the shoreline. Give those birds some space. Walk around them rather than through them. Let people know that the nests and the chicks are difficult to see. Like I showed in some of those pictures, they're super camouflaged in the sand and can accidentally be stepped on. If a bird is incubating eggs or brooding a chick and somebody, gets too close, that adult is going to run off of that nest. And in the South Carolina summer, it gets hot out there and that sand gets really super hot quickly. So the longer, a bird is off of that nest, the longer those eggs are exposed to that heat. And it can cause damage to the eggs and can kill chicks if they're exposed to that sun for too long. And then birds are protected under state and federal laws as well. So just some examples of talking points, which I kind of already talked about a little bit, but these are some questions that you might get from people is, why is this area posted and off limits? So the reasons that we kind of already talked about, is, birds abandoning the nests, and the chicks and eggs could get hot and die from the sun. Why are dogs not allowed in an area? Birds can tolerate people more than they tolerate a dog. And that's because a dog looks more like a predator to them. Coyotes and foxes and things that are a natural predator to them, a dog kind of looks like that. So, a dog that might just be running along next to their owner, a bird doesn't know that that dog may not try to come and eat them or their chicks. So, these birds are going to flush and fly at a much further distance to a dog than they would a person. So that's why we restrict dogs in those areas. And then, just learning some basic life history facts about some of the focal species, mating behaviors, incubation period, how the adults raise and protect their young, and some of the feeding behaviors that I kind of talked about a little bit too. Those are all things that can kind of engage the public and try to help them gain an interest or a respect for the birds that we're talking about. So there will be some times where people don't want to listen to you. It's a small percentage, as Betty can attest to, but there are some people, that just don't care. And they feel that they have the right to do whatever they want. So, when that happens, we don't want to be the enforcers on the beach, so, we don't want to get into an argument or anything with these people. So, we just want to try to educate them. So, if they do refuse, just you can inform them that these birds are protected by state and federal law. And if they continue to not cooperate, then, you can call beach patrol and we can have them kind of get talked to by somebody else as well. If somebody gets aggressive or threatening, don't engage, just back off immediately. And, either call for help if you need it, or just simply walk away and let, beach patrol or somebody else know that somebody's kind of doing something they're not supposed to do. Here are some examples of some violations that we've seen over the years. So a lot of times it's people that, are trying to get to their fishing hole, and rather than walking all the way around, they walk right through the nesting area. So, Now, these are some of the things that we're trying to avoid, but it's hard because we don't have people out there all the time. So if you do see a violation, and you want to report it, or if somebody is, like I said, kind of refusing to cooperate, there's some numbers that you can call. Beach Patrol is going to be the number that you can get to where they'll be able to get there the quickest. The next phone number would be myself, or Jim Jordan, the other biologist here. Kent Bold is one of our code enforcement officers. And then if you can't get any of those, you can call Town Hall and they can get a hold of somebody as well. And obviously, if it's an emergency, just call 911 first. All right, I'm done. I'm going to turn it over to Betty, and she will talk to you guys a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program. And then after that, we'll open it up to any questions that there might be.
Am I up?
You're up, and I'm going.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I thought I'd begin with just a little bit about myself. I have always loved birds and always watched birds, but I really didn't know much of anything about shorebirds. So just a few years ago, I attended a Kiowa meeting just like this one to learn about shorebirds and the program. And I found it very interesting, but I just have to say that I will always remember my big aha moment. And that was when I heard the same statistics that Aaron shared with you earlier. And the statistics were that in a 2016 study, we learned that shorebirds have seen a nearly 70% decline in the last 40 years. Let that sink in a minute. Nearly 70% in 40 years. And red knots at a more rapid rate of nearly 85% in that same time period. An 85% decline in the last 40 years. So it was really those facts alone that convinced me that I wanted to just help try to make a difference for them. Shorebirds really need our help. They're in trouble. But the good news, or some good news, is that Audubon recently released a study showing that beaches that have shorebird stewardship programs have made a positive effect on shorebird populations. Several coastal bird species have grown their populations considerably faster than birds in areas without active stewardship programs. So stewards do make a difference. Aaron told you lots about the birds and the reasons that shorebirds need our help. So I'm just going to cover the details for you of the stewardship program. The focus of what we do is to just get out on the beach and educate and inspire beachgoers. We want them to appreciate and care about our shorebirds. We're not out there to be police. We're not out there to be enforcers, but we're there to just simply share with folks about the birds in a positive way and let people know how they can help and how they can share the beach with the birds. Our season is now through July, and we're asking for a minimum of commitment of 6 hours from each steward. Of course, we're hoping that you enjoy it enough to decide to do more hours than that, but 6 hours is the minimum. So we are in the early part of our season now. The knots keep arriving. We currently have hundreds of them on the island. They don't have their famous rusty red colors yet. They're sort of a drab grayish color, and they'll just keep continuing to arrive. And we expect to have thousands of them in April. And that's very exciting. That's a treat for you guys to see. It's then that they'll molt into their beautiful red breeding plumage that we all know and love. And then typically in mid-May, they depart. But during the period that they are here on the island, we need stewards doing two different things. When the tide's high, as Aaron was talking about, the knots roost or rest on the ends of the island, mainly the west end. So we need stewards to be out there protecting the roosting flocks. And as the tide drops, they break out and forage for food, often all along our island beach. And when they are in the middle of their critically important task of feeding, they're often interrupted and forced to fly off due to walkers, runners, dogs, children chasing them, bicyclists, or simply somebody just wanting an awesome Instagram photo of a gorgeous flock of birds rising up together in flight. So they have challenges trying to be able to feed. So we're going to try something new this season. Similar to what Turtle Patrol does, we have broken the island up into 1 mile zones, give or take. And we're going to have stewards become zone walkers of their zone and watch for feeding red knot flocks that may need to be stewarded. These shifts will always be based on the tide, and we're hoping that since many folks enjoy a regular beach walk anyway, that they'll now have an opportunity to combine shorebird stewarding into their leisure activity. So this graphic here shows the 8 zones for our zone walkers. We tried to keep it simple for folks. With the exception of the ends of the island, we had each zone begin and end at a boardwalk. So they may all not be exactly 1 mile, but we tried to keep it as close to that as we could. And then after the knots depart, we turn our focus toward the nesting area out on the east end, just past the ocean course. Nesting starts in April and chicks soon after. So we need our stewards to be out there sitting by or walking along the critical nesting habitat, educating beachgoers to give the birds plenty of space to safely nest and raise their young out there. And for folks who want the option to be a year-round steward, or for anyone who is here a lot in the winter, we continue shorebird stewarding all year long. Although piping plovers don't nest here, they are migrants. They face many challenges, so they really need our help too. And they, as Aaron told you, they feed and roost on the ends of the island, so that's really where we need stewards for them. Okay, so since you're going to be out on an open beach for at least a couple hours, it's helpful to be prepared. Make sure you wear your t-shirt. That's going to be provided to you, and it will identify you as a Kiowa Island shorebird steward. Definitely have your cell phone in case you need to take pictures of what you're seeing, or in case you need to call security if you happen upon a person doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Due to COVID, binoculars are for your own viewing pleasure this year. And trust me, you're going to be glad you have them when you come upon a gorgeous flock of knots and want to see their beauty up close. So try to carry your binoculars with you. Normally, as Aaron said, we share our binoculars with beachgoers to help them see the birds closer. But this year, it's going to be important to show folks the laminated materials that will be provided to you. And those will include beautiful close-up images of the various shorebirds that you're going to be talking to them about. And it's always a good idea to have a small notebook and pen handy to jot down and record things that you see or any observations that you might want to report to us. So I know that you're probably likely sitting there thinking, well, I don't know much about shorebirds. How will I be able to talk to people about them? Or how will I even know what to talk about? And I felt that way too when I sat in on my first shorebird stewardship meeting. And I can assure you that you will not be left alone to figure it out. If you decide to join the stewardship program, you're going to get a copy of this presentation emailed to you so you can review it. This is being recorded, so you can also watch it again for review when the recorded version comes out. I email educational info and news of shorebird related events regularly to my stewards so that they can continue to learn. We host a number of bird walks where we can go out on the island as a group to look at shorebirds together and learn about them. I will be lining up speakers to provide online presentations on shorebird topics. And then here I put 2 really great websites to check out, and you can learn a lot about shorebirds on those 2 sites. So don't be overwhelmed by it. A good idea in the beginning is mainly focus on learning just the 5 birds that we talked about here today. You'll find that in time, you'll just gradually, naturally increase in knowledge and your ability to recognize the birds. The most important thing that I want to say to you today is you do not have to be an expert on shorebirds and shorebird identification. I'm not. I'm still learning every day, and that's the fun of it. All you need is a heart for the birds and a desire to help them, and it just all grows from there. So let's talk about when you're on the beach. As mentioned previously, we're there to educate. It's been my experience that beachgoers don't need to hear a whole lot of information, just a little bit about the struggles of the birds and what people can do to help them, or simply share with them some amazing fact or information about their lives. And since the average person on the beach can't get close enough to truly see the bird's beauty without causing them to fly away, use the pictures that we are going to give you to show the up-close images of them, and be enthusiastic about the birds. Enthusiasm is often contagious, and if you can share anything to help somebody connect to the bird, to make them feel compassion or respect for them and their struggle, then you've done your job. And I always like to end every conversation with beachgoers by inviting them to spread the word about the birds to others. A few don'ts. As I said before, I can't emphasize it enough. You do not have to be a shorebird expert. Also, we keep all interactions on our part friendly and positive. Even if you come upon somebody doing something that angers or frustrates you, it has been my experience that most people just simply don't know about the struggles of the shorebirds and the help they need. Most people just don't know. So usually when people know better, they do better. And lastly, it's rare, but if someone were to get very angry with you, simply back off immediately and call island security if needed. And if there's somebody doing something that they shouldn't be doing and refusing to listen to you, then just simply report the violation from a distance. All this information is obvious, kind of self-explanatory. On the last one there, we talked about before, binocular use should be for your own personal enjoyment, not to be shared. And about those laminated photo materials that you'll be receiving, they should be viewed by beach goers, keeping mindful of proper social distancing. In review, keep all of these points in mind, but most importantly, the Shorebird Stewards experience should be fun. It's a fun opportunity to share how awesome our shorebirds are with fellow beachgoers. And here I've already told you about bird walks, online speakers, laminated photo materials, and t-shirts that all Shorebird Stewards will be receiving. But also, if you decide to join the group, I'll be following up with an email for you to sign up for shifts. And here's a helpful suggestion. It really helps to think about it and choose a day of the week and commit to Steward on that day and time. And that way you can kind of plan your life around it. So I encourage you to kind of consider that. Also of note, due to the busyness on the beach on weekends and holidays, those are times when stewarding is especially needed. And spring break weeks, the week before and after Easter, these are all times when the birds can really, really use stewards out there. So for those of you who decide to join us, here's your homework now. There's my email. So email me your name, phone number, email address, and your t-shirt size. And I need this information ASAP since I need to order t-shirts and prepare other materials. Please get that information to me by Friday. I also realize there's probably many questions regarding the logistics of all of this. More details are going to be emailed to everybody who decides to become a steward. But if you would like to discuss or ask anything, please feel free to email me. And if you would like to talk on the phone, we can arrange a good time for that too. So that's it. Thank you so much for your interest in Shorebirds and this program. We would love to have you join us, but if you decide it just won't work into your life, then I'm happy that at least you got to learn about our shorebirds and the challenges they face, and hopefully you'll spread the word to others. Tell your family and friends. Teach your kids and your grandkids. The birds need everybody to know. Thanks for being here.
All right, well, thank you, Betty. So we're gonna move into, I guess, the question period here, but just before we do that, I just wanted to mention, if you after listening to this presentation and you feel like this isn't really something that you want to do, you still can help the Shorebirds, and just by keeping the things that we talked about, in mind when you might be out on the beach, never intentionally force birds to fly, respect those posted areas, keep the dogs on a leash, keep your distance. And then obviously we hope that you would become a volunteer Shorebird steward. But obviously know that, it might not be for everybody either. But there are things that you can do as well to help. So. All right, I'm going to unshare my screen and see what kind of questions we might have in the chat. So I'll start with the first one. So this is, I don't know who it's from. It's just an email, but I'll just read it. Is this sign enough? Says area closed, but then highlights no dogs allowed. Have people say it applies to, okay. Yes, I've had that happen a couple of times. The sign does say, it does imply no dogs, but it is implied that nobody else should be in there as well. Some beaches will actually tie string in between each sign to kind of make that a little bit more obvious. What I've done, instead of tying string, which can come unraveled and then become litter on the beach, is place the signs a little closer together to make that impact look more like a fence rather than just widely spaced signs. There are a few spots where I do rope off, where it's a smaller section where I know people like to cut through, so I will put rope in between the signs in those areas.
And Aaron, I was the one that asked that question. It really put the emphasis, the exclamation mark was on no dogs allowed. You showed a second sign about 3 slides later. I could barely read it, but it looked like it really emphasized area closed, where that first one you showed about signage, emphasized more no dogs allowed. So that's why I was asking, is it enough?
Right. I have to look back and see. Let me look back and see what, yeah, so the sign that says area closed, those are the ones that we use around the nesting area. It says, and it goes on, and it's the picture with the 2 birds on it, and it says shorebird nesting, no dogs allowed. So yeah, those are the signs. Those are provided to us by the DNR, and those are the signs that they use in all their other areas in the state as well. So but no, you're right. I have had some people think that just means no dogs, and I had to explain to them that no, it means area is closed to everybody. But all right, the next one. Many times fishermen are the violators going through the nesting zone. Yep, that is an issue. I was able to intercept a few of those fishermen last year and had some talks to them. And I think I got through to them. Obviously, there's a lot of fisher people out there. So the only thing I can say to that is, like I said, we can't be out there at all times, but during the nesting season, you know, if we could have stewards out there more than we don't, we could potentially get to those people and, you know, either stop them or talk to them, you know, so that they know what, you know, that they shouldn't be doing that. It's obvious because they walk right through the signs and go underneath the rope. And in those situations, you know, we can write a ticket to those people, and we probably should start writing tickets. I tend to like to educate first, but if we have repeat offenders, then that's when you know, we can start making it, you know, enforce it more with writing tickets and things like that. Beach Patrol, myself, and some other people are able to write tickets for those violations. So, like I said, you know, if people are blatantly doing something where they probably know they're doing something wrong, then we can enforce those with a ticket. Do we have a badge or ID card to indicate we are part of the program for the stewardships? So yes, we have created little ID cards in the past. And that is something that we're going to try to do again. We have a machine here at Town Hall that will make those. The person who made those for us a few years ago does not work here anymore. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to use that machine and try to create those things. So, but we're gonna try to do those again.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I wanted to just add something to that really quick. Yes, we want to get name tags to you guys besides t-shirts. And the reason I think name tags are important and really helpful is that I know for myself, there are many times where I was not expecting to be doing any shorebird stewarding. So I wasn't going out on the beach wearing my t-shirt, but I always would stick my name tag in my pocket every beach walk I would go on, because inevitably during red knot season, I would run into a flock of knots that needed a steward. And so I just always kept my name tag, because just to have that lanyard hanging around your neck when you're talking to people, it really helps. And so I do want everyone to have name tags. We're working on that right now.
All right. So the next one is, with the PGA coming, extra precaution coverages for the ocean course area. Yes, that will be critical. Being that the PGA will be here in May, that will be the exact same time that these terns will be on eggs. And I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. It's going to be much more difficult to even get to the ocean course because there won't be places to park and stuff. So I'm thinking about ways to do that. One idea would be, you know, to if we could get at least to the beach club. There's a beach parking area right at the beach club, and people potentially could then walk from the beach club down. And the other idea that I'm kicking around that I don't know if I'll be able to do it or not, but during that PGA week is to just shut down, if the birds are nesting in big numbers again, is just to try to close that part of the beach off and not allow people even that far down the beach. That's something that I don't know if I can technically do or not, but we'll have to talk to my supervisors and probably the mayor and make sure that's something that we could do. But that would be the easiest thing, is just to prevent people from even getting that far down. But I don't know. So we'll just have to see. Are we wearing masks and social distancing? Yes, we are social distancing for sure. If you want to wear a mask, you can. I don't think it's required to wear a mask out when we're outside. But I would say to always have a mask with you in case you are talking to somebody and they ask you to put a mask on. That way you have it with you. But yes, social distancing for sure. We will be in place, at least 6 feet. You can stand further away and probably talk to people, even from further than 6 feet as well. Dave asks when shifts will start. I don't know, Betty, you got some info for that one?
Well, you can do stewarding tomorrow if you want. So in other words, the red knots are here and they need our help. And so you could do it today if you wanted. But in other words, even though there's not official shifts right now, anyone is welcome to go out and steward, and I would love that. As soon as we know who wants to definitely be a shorebird steward, then I will be emailing you the information to sign up for shifts. And the zone walkers, like I said, are going to be based on the tide. So they'll have very specific times. And then the ends of the island and all will be sort of set 2-hour shifts. So, but you'll get that information when you let us know whether you're interested.
Okay. Can a bird have multiple nests in one season? Yes, they can. Shorebirds generally won't have, well, all right, let me back up. So if they have a nest and it gets predated or they abandon it because it gets overwashed, they will try to re-nest. But there's not enough time in a season for a shorebird to have 2 separate broods of chicks, if that makes sense. So there's not enough time in the breeding season for them to lay eggs, brood their young, teach their young, for the month or so or 2, after they fledged, and then to nest again. So no, they won't have multiple broods in a season, unlike songbirds, which can have, 2 or 3. Like our bluebirds can nest up to 3 times in a year. They'll have 3 different broods in a year. The shorebirds are not able to do that. And then the nesting season is so long because of kind of what I just said. Because these chicks take a little bit longer to develop. They're highly developed when they hatch out, but it takes them a long time to be able to fly. So they stay in that chick phase for a long time, so they're unable to fly. So they are just kind of running around in that nesting area, and they stay in that area for a while as being tended to by the adults. All right, I think that covered. Is there an option for non-Kiowa residents? How do we get past the gate? Yes, that is so there's a couple things here. So I do have permission from the county parks to allow shorebird stewards to park at the county park for free while stewarding. So if you are wanting to, go to the west end and steward for red knots while they're here, or piping plovers in the winter, or any time of the year, just to steward for any birds that might be here. It doesn't have to be just for a certain species that's here. You could go out there any time of the year and be a shorebird steward, because there's birds on our beach all the time. So that's one option for non-residents, is to use, park at Beach Walker County Park for free. And if we have enough interest of other people that want to go out to the other area, I believe we can probably work something out with Kika and be able to get passes, out to the other end of the island for the east end too. We'll have to just kind of work that out with the Kika security and kind of see what they feel or what they can do. But we've done that in the past. It can kind of be a pain. getting, a bunch of passes all the time, because they generally don't give a pass for a long period of time. So you might have to get a pass every single time, but it's something we can talk to them about and kind of see what we can work out.
Yeah, we have a number of stewards who aren't Kiowa residents, and we make that work. I get passes for folks. It's not a problem. And so don't worry about that. We'll take care of it.
Maybe a dedicated wildlife parking spot for the Steward program during PGA. Yep, that's a good idea. I kind of thought about that as I was talking about the other thing. And that's something that I can talk to the resort about, kind of express our concern with all those people that are going to be wanting to go out on the beach during that time, and see if they would allow us to have a spot for a steward or two to park out at the ocean course, given that they have credentials from the town, and can get through all that, to get out there to do what we need to do. So that's something I can look into, talk to the resort and see if that's something that they would work with us about. All right, how do you deal with people who say all beaches are public and they can be wherever they want? Yeah. I mean, it's true, beaches are public, but we do have, as I alluded to, we do have the ability to close portions and keep people out. The town has several codes on our books that have regulations directly associated with the beach and the wildlife and things like that. So, people might think that they can go anywhere and do whatever. And in most parts of the year they can, but in certain seasons when we have a resource or birds that we want to protect, we have the ability to close those areas and keep people out. But yeah, as Nancy said, education, all the things that we just talked about are things that, you can use to talk to that person that thinks that, they can do and go wherever. So try to just using those talking points and things that we've just discussed here today. It's not going to change everybody's mind, but maybe it'll change someone's mind.
Erin, that was my question because, I've been out there photographing and trying to be a steward anyways and giving people biology lessons. But that is if I have a belligerent person, that's going to be their comeback. They're going to say, okay, this is public beach. I can be here with my dog. I can be here with my kids. I can do whatever I want. So, that's most of the people comply. Don't worry, you people that want to be stewards. Most people really comply and they're very interested in what you're going to tell them biologically and everything. But, you are going to get a few belligerent people and they're going to come up with that and say, I can be here and you don't have the right to tell me that I can't. So
I would like to just speak to that in that I think the challenge for stewards, and you get better with practice, is to not get angry at some of these people. And most people, like I said, I truly mean this, most people love and appreciate hearing about the shorebirds, and they end up wanting to know more about it, and they'll ask more questions. You do get occasional people that are gonna, be defiant. And what I learned is I try to stay very focused on my task. And my task is to try to instill in folks something to make them care about the birds. So rather than argue a point about whether a beach is public or not with somebody, what I try to do is just say, but can I tell you about these birds? I think if you just say, please just hear me about these birds. And they don't want to be rambled to a lot of detail. You just want to hook them with the things that sort of tug at the old heartstrings about the struggles that they have, or something really cool about them, or how they need our help. And if you can just do that, you know, you don't have to argue the point of what their beach rights are. And it's hard. It is hard. And you get some people that you're just not gonna, but on the whole, that's the tactic I try to take, is just kind of stick to the mission of getting them to care about the birds.
Yep, that was good. But yeah, you know, if that doesn't work, then Beach Patrol can be called. And when they roll up in their truck with the logo on the side, that looks way more official, and they might listen to that a little bit better. So.
And I will add, this is important for stewards to know, that I would say a large problem is dog owners. And so I find that they can often be more, I don't know, defensive or something. And so I think that it's helpful to always let them know that you love dogs, you know, greet the dog and pet the dog. And, you know, like, you want to be friendly about the dog, but most dog owners don't realize how much shorebirds view them as predators. And so again, that's the way you go about it. Yes, I know your dog wouldn't hurt a fly, but the shorebirds don't know that. And, you know, then try to explain to them, and, you know, but I guess that's it.
All right, I think that's it for the chat. Does anybody else have anything? No? Well, I thank everybody for sticking around with us for almost 2 hours here. And we look forward to seeing everybody out on the beach. And like Betty said, if it's something that you want to do, get with her, let her know that you want to do it. And you know, we'll start working on getting those people and getting everybody out on the beach as soon as possible. So, again, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Take care. Bye.
See y'all.